Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. We appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Coming up, it is Motivation Monday. We're going to be speaking with a woman who was able to overcome PCOS. You know, doctors told her they never thought she would be able to have a child, but then she changed her diet, she changed her life, and everything seemed to fall right into place. We're going to be speaking with Alison Tierney about her incredible journey back to health momentarily. Also today, Dr. Neal Barnard is here to kick off a new week for us. He has studied extensively the link between food and PCOS for his book, Your Body in Balance. Dr. Barnard, really looking forward to diving into this with you.
You bet, Chuck.
All right. And we're going to be opening up the doctor's mailbag. So if there's something on your mind that you would like to ask Dr. Barnard, go ahead and drop that in the comments section. You can tweet that to us using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. Just send that over to @PCRM or @ChuckCarroll WLC. And then a little bit later on in the show, we're also going to be checking health headlines. A lot to talk about today. There is a meat packing plant out in Colorado that had one outbreak of coronavirus cases among employees earlier in this year. Well, that same plant now facing a second outbreak. We're going to give you the details on that, plus a new study showing the link between high blood pressure and brain damage. Interesting new findings we're going to be diving into later on in the show. And then later on tonight, if we could bring Dr. Barnard back into the conversation for this one. Dr. Barnard, you and I have a fun event coming up tonight. We're going to be speaking you're going to be talking at 5 o'clock tonight. We're going to have Lindsay Nixon, the Happy Herbivore, join us. You're going to be giving a book talk. It's kind of a Cyber Monday virtual book tour, and it gives people an opportunity to pick up some signed copies of your book.
That's right. We're going to be talking about Your Body in Balance in great detail, how foods can actually affect hormones, which affect every aspect of your health. And we'll talk a little bit about the cheese trap and the vegan starter kit, other books too. And what it actually is a fundraiser for PCRM. All proceeds will go to the Physicians Committee's work. And so I'm hoping that people will join us at 5 o'clock today, Eastern Time.
And what I love about this is Cyber Monday, which means it is the online kickoff, the unofficial online kickoff to holiday shopping. And so this was a great opportunity to pick up a holiday gift for a friend or a loved one. I know that you can pick up signed copies of Your Body in Balance. You're also signing copies of the Vegan Starter Kit and the Cheese Trap. You're going to be speaking a little bit about that. You can pick up copies of all three at a discounted price, or you can pick up a single copy. All you need to do to sign up to join us tonight, starting at 5 o'clock Eastern, is head over to pcrm.org/buy now. And again, all proceeds go to benefit the Physicians Committee. Now, Dr. Barnard, let's get to the heart of the matter today. And we're going to be talking about PCOS. And as you said, that is something you have studied extensively for Your Body in Balance. So let's preview the discussion tonight a little bit. Can you walk us through what PCOS is and how diet plays a role here?
You bet. First of all, in a word, PCOS is frustrating. So many women have irregular periods. They might want to try to get pregnant, and it's just not working. And the symptoms that they might have don't really fit together. And so it's very, very frustrating for everybody. However, knowledgeable doctors are able to put the puzzle pieces together. And there are really three big chunks of it. The first is irregular periods. You're not having the regular cycle that you might expect. The second thing is that your skin will change, and it really in two ways. One is that you can get some acne, more than you might be expecting. And the other thing is that your hair can change. You can have some facial hair, like a little dark hair where you don't want it to be. And you can also see some hair loss. And the third thing is polycystic ovaries. Now, what that means is that there's a cyst on an ovary, but you can have this syndrome without it, because what the syndrome actually is, it's a genetic condition. It's So 1 in 5 women gets it. It's a dominant trait that you got from dad or you got from mom. And all it means is that your body is not putting out hormones in quite the right balance. Men get a little bit of female hormone and a lot of male hormone. Women get a lot of female hormone, a little bit of male hormone. In PCOS, women get just a little touch extra male hormone along with the female hormone, and that causes all these symptoms. Now, it can be mostly genetic, but there can be some environmental contributors. Chemical exposures are believed to play a part in it as well, but it's really an androgen problem, too much male hormone. So just, Chuck, let me just walk you through the pathology of this just really quickly. This will not be on the test, but just so that people know what's happening. The pituitary gland, which is part of your brain, releases luteinizing hormone, which goes to the ovary. Insulin in your blood will also go to the ovary for susceptible women, and that causes it to make extra androgens. Not much you can do about it, you might think, because it's genetic. Well, that's true. However, it turns out that in the same way as our research team has been able to manage how much insulin is in your blood and how that insulin acts, we can do the same thing for a woman who's got PCOS. So here's the diet for PCOS. No animal products. You're going to be vegan. And we keep oils really low, and we focus on low glycemic index foods. And what that means, it's not rocket science. White bread is high glycemic index. It spikes your blood sugar. And that's like the light blue line here. Something like rye bread or pumpernickel bread is more gentle on your blood sugar. That's the darker blue line here. It doesn't make your blood sugar rise so much. We want to favor the low GI foods. Now, it's actually pretty simple to do. Sugar is high glycemic index, but fruit, even though it's sweet, is mostly low GI. It doesn't spike your blood sugar. White and wheat breads do tend to spike your blood sugar, but rye and pumpernickel, much less so. So that's a good choice. White potatoes, for whatever reason, will make blood sugar rise, but sweet potatoes and yams tend not to. Cold cereals will spike your blood sugar, especially if there is a toy inside, but oatmeal or bran cereals tend not to. I should mention, by the way, don't just focus on the glycemic index. You got to be vegan. You also got to be low fat. That's the main thing. So a couple of things for people who have PCOS. Do try our 21-day vegan kickstart either online or the app. Have a look at Your Body in Balance. It has a whole chapter on it. And lots of recipes to get you going, and hopefully you can tackle this condition. So let me come back to you, Chuck.
Yeah, and again, if you want to learn more about this, great opportunity is to join us tonight at 5 o'clock Eastern. Head over to pcrm.org/buy-now. Register for the event. Pick up a signed copy of Your Body in Balance. All proceeds go to benefit the Physicians Committee. You're going to be going more into this. You're also going to be talking about the cheese trap tonight. It's going to be such a wonderful event. But really quickly, specific again to PCOS, I was doing some number crunching here when you mentioned just the percentage of women in the U.S. that have it. I mean, you're talking about millions and millions of women. This is a very common condition. I would assume. I mean, it's right up there with the most common chronic conditions out there, right?
It is actually the most common cause of ovulatory infertility, meaning the woman goes to see the gynecologist and says, my period's just all over the map. It's just not really at all regular or predictable. What is it? The number one cause is PCOS. And one other thing that needs to be said, PCOS is not your fault. When couples are having trouble with fertility, the sense of sort of self-blame really comes into it in a big way. And I just want to be clear, it's not your fault. This is something we inherited. It's a genetic variant. It's just the way it is, but there's a lot that diet can do. And so we put that to work and we see what happens.
All right, let's go ahead and open up the doctor's mailbag now. We have a great question related to PCOS today from Sarah. She writes, I only eat cheese a few times every week, but is it possible that my PCOS will improve if I cut that little bit of cheese out of my diet? I don't eat it all the time. Can I still see some improvement?
Oh, what a great question. Yes, I would get away from cheese completely, really for a couple of reasons. One is that cheese does have hormones in it, as you've probably heard me say before. It comes out of the cow and it carries estrogens along with it. You don't want those exogenous hormones in your body. But the other thing is that cheese is 70% fat. And that's a lot. And so that fat will go into your muscle and liver cells and cause insulin resistance. And so that means your body makes extra insulin to try to counteract that. And that extra insulin makes PCOS worse. So, yep, skip the cheese. You're going to be glad you did.
All right, Dr. Barnard, if we did not get to your question today, we will save that. Dr. Barnard, I know you'll try to get somebody an answer on an upcoming episode, so keep on sending those questions in. We do see each and every one that comes in. Look forward to speaking with you a little bit later on tonight.
You bet, Chuck.
All right. Let's talk now about a woman who was able to overcome PCOS. This is a woman who I had the opportunity to speak with before the pandemic. Matter of fact, it was right when Your Body Imbalance was launched. Alison Tierney is her name, and she is actually a dietitian, knows more about food and illness than many of us will ever possibly come close to knowing. And yet here she is with her own struggle with PCOS, but it wasn't until she put the connection together with her diet that she finally began to see some results. And as you're going to hear in this interview, you just heard Dr. Barnard talking about cheese and dairy and how important that is to get out of your diet. Well, Alison was raised in Wisconsin. She grew up on meat. She grew up on cheese. She drank milk every single day. And little did she know that that had a huge role to do with her PCOS struggle. And when she switched over to a plant-based diet, that is when her health remarkably improved. So here now, for Motivation Monday is a wonderful conversation that I was able to have with Alison Tierney. Continuing our look at the upcoming book, Your Body in Balance, talking all about hormones. And my next guest is somebody that certainly I think can talk about this for days. Alison Tierney is an oncology dietitian based in Wisconsin with one incredible story. And Alison, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You are featured prominently in Dr. Barnard's book, and that is because of your story. And having read the pages that he wrote about you, I will start before we actually dive into your story and just say that my heart went out to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It means a lot.
Your story actually begins, many, many years ago, back when you were still a young girl, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I started having issues with my menstrual cycle very early on. And it wasn't actually that surprising because my family, all the females had trouble with it as well.
Really? So
Mhm.
this was just, you were dealt that hand in life with the genes, huh?
Yeah, but I don't think it was talked about very much when I was first going through that. I remember the first day that I got my period, I thought something was wrong with me. Even though I had gone through all those health classes, I didn't really understand. But then from very early age, it was definitely irregular periods and lots of acne. That was a big problem for me.
So acne, I assume you were still in school at that point, so that's got to be a big concern.
Yeah, and I was an athlete, so I actually grew up playing boys ice hockey.
Oh
So
wow.
I wore a face mask all the time. So we always should attribute it to being an athlete and sweating a lot and wearing that face mask because I always had the acne right here.
Right.
And so it was more, oh, it's just because you are so sweaty. You always had that face mask on. And that's what I thought. Okay, I'm a teenager and I play hockey with a face mask. That's what the acne is.
Right.
But then as it progressed further into adulthood, that's when I started to know that there were more problems too.
So was acne kind of the wake up call for you, or when
Uh,
did you first realize that, okay, well, maybe something is actually wrong here and it's not just my family is dealing with this?
Yeah, I think I knew what was really something was wrong is when the periods were really irregular. So an average woman's cycle is about 28 days. It can go plus or minus a few days. I was getting a period about every 5 months,
Mm.
and that was super inconsistent, but that would be about the average. And then it would last for, instead of 3 days for the average person, it would last for 2 weeks for me. So I started knowing that I was having a lot of problems when it came to that.
That that yeah, that'd be a wake up call. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That had to be pretty frustrating.
Yeah, and you can't predict when it's going to happen for vacations or anything like that. You just have no idea when it's going to hit you.
So, were you experiencing any sort of pain or anything when it would strike? Was it major cramps?
Yeah, actually, I've been very lucky from that standpoint of things, as I get very minimal cramping and always have gotten very minimal cramping. It was just very intense, heavy bleeding constantly.
And you're still a young woman, but I would imagine so as you progress into adulthood, you maybe start taking an eye on you want to have children,
Mhm.
correct?
Yep.
That's kind of, every little girl's dream is they say growing up, you
Mhm.
want to be a mom. So you always thought that that would be in the cards for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I never thought that it wouldn't be because my mom has four kids
Right.
and actually I have a twin sister. So fertility didn't seem to be an issue.
Right. 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 You're the proof, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you meet a guy, right? Like,
Mhm.
and things progress as relationships do, and
Yeah.
you say, "I do." Look at you blushing right now. Okay. See, I can talk about this because I actually got my start in broadcasting doing a love song show.
Oh,
Yeah.
very nice.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, so things progress and the relationship's going well. How soon after you said "I do" did you start to try to conceive?
So it was definitely at least 2 years because we were both students. So we
Ah.
had planned on trying to be out of school before we would start a family. So I always planned that if it happened, it happened. But my husband was in pharmacy school, and then my whole education story is a long one. But I ended up going back to school to be a dietitian and then getting my master's degree. So I was in school for even longer than my husband was, who went to
Mhm.
pharmacy school. So it wasn't until right about graduation for myself that we decided that we were ready to start a family.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to put a pin in where we are right now. We're going to come back to this.
Yeah.
I neglected to come back to this dietitian thing because here you are, and you're having some of these issues. When did it dawn on you though that maybe it's kind of what I'm eating that's the problem?
Really good question. So it didn't hit me for actually a while into it because it wasn't really talked about in dietetic school that
Right.
much and how much food was related to our hormones and PCOS and the entire fertility spectrum. It was actually my work in cancer that led me to figure it out on my own for the PCOS.
Mm.
So that's kind of a whole nother story in itself.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so back to where we were.
Mhm.
2 years removed now from school. That was kind of where you were at, and you guys start trying at that point,
Yep.
correct?
Mhm.
How much trying was there?
Well, to even start the story, so I was placed on birth control for my PCOS when I think I was 18.
Okay.
So during that time, my acne had cleared up and I was having regular cycles. So I wasn't thinking a whole much of it again. So then we decided to get off the pill to start trying to conceive a family.
Mhm.
And I'm a twin. So my doctor told me, just so you know, in the first month off the pill, you're at higher risk for having twins. And my husband and I decided, well, we're willing to take that risk on.
Sure.
So we actually kind of had this hope and expectation that we would get pregnant relatively quickly. I think based on that, being a healthy weight, all of these types of things. And time progressed. And in that year, so that was actually 2015, I had two periods in the whole year of 2015.
Wow.
So we knew that was a problem right then and there because if you're not ovulating, there's no chance to get pregnant.
Right. And I would imagine that was devastating. Talk to me about the emotions there.
Oh, roller coaster emotions and the constant emotions of feeling like you're doing something wrong, whether it be through diet or environmental exposures and so forth, but you feel like you're the problem, that something that you're doing is really hard. And then especially being childbearing age and seeing all your friends get pregnant, that became very difficult because you're super happy for them, but you're also in the same right, you're very disappointed and frustrated about what's
Mhm.
going on in your own
Mhm.
journey. And you feel sort of like a disappointment to your husband because it's quote unquote your fault, not necessarily his fault. But he was never like that, of course. But we took it on to be our journey together, not just my journey.
So what kind of interventions were you guys looking at? I assume that you're working with the doctor at that point?
Yeah, so we were working with an OBGYN and not specifically a specialist, but in a regular OBGYN who knew that I was a dietitian and kind of wanted to take more of the natural approach as much as possible.
Right.
So the first thing, because had PCOS, the first thing that was started was metformin, which is a diabetes medication, but it's the first line of treatment for PCOS because PCOS, a classic symptom, is insulin resistance.
Mhm.
So that was the first thing that was started. But after starting the metformin and taking it for several months, nothing really changed. My periods weren't coming any more regularly, and they were still lasting a long time when they did happen. So they were super inconsistent.
Right.
So then the next step was, okay, we're ready to have more intervention. What is the next intervention? But diet was never talked about the entire time. And I was already a dietitian, so I was already researching things already on my own. But the next step was to try more medications like Provera, progesterone, and Femara. There's other options there too, but that was what my doctor was talking about for me.
And with each one of these medications, did you get your hopes up like, man, this is it. This is the answer. We're finally going to be able to conceive at this point.
Yeah, I definitely thought that. I thought that there's going to be so much better chance to be able to do this. This works for other people. I've heard so many more success stories about it. This is going to be the next step. We're not going to have to go much farther than this.
What about the letdown when you kind of come to that realization that, nope, this pill isn't working either?
It makes it so much harder because you just feel like, again, you are the one that's causing this, and there's something physically wrong with you as a female to not even be able to do what a female is supposed to do.
Yeah. At what point does it click for you again? Like you say that you're starting to do this research and these medications aren't working. So clearly you need to take another approach. At what point then do you say, like, okay, well, let's start adjusting what I'm eating?
Yeah, exactly. So as I mentioned before, actually kind of the conversation in nutrition actually started with cancer. So I'm a board certified specialist in oncology. So I work with cancer patients day by day in the nutrition world. And I started doing a lot more of my own research in nutrition and cancer because I was very excited and wanted to learn how I can best help my cancer patients, not only while they're going through the course of treatment, but also post-treatment to help prevent their risk of recurrence. So I was learning a lot of this information that unfortunately you don't learn in dietetic school,
Right.
or even when I got my master's degree. And so I was taking it upon myself to learn even more of this information. And I kept learning more and more about the information related to hormones and cancer. And it started to really click for me. So I had thought to myself, well, if I'm teaching my cancer patients this, why am I not applying it to myself? So it first started for me, I started to cut meat out of my diet because meat was something that was not hard for me. I pretty much ate meat because I thought that I needed to eat it to get my protein,
Of
right?
course,
The standard
of course.
across the
Yeah.
board.
Where do you get your protein?
Yep, exactly. So, and being a dietitian, I did know that you could get protein from other sources, but I don't think that I realized how much protein you could get from other sources. So I literally said it was September, and I said, okay, for the entire month of September, I'm not going to eat meat. Just going to see what happens.
Right.
I'm going to be a vegetarian. I never turned back. And I remember having a conversation, especially with my parents and my dad, and he's like, your acne is kind of clearing up a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, I noticed that too. He's like, I think it's because you're not eating meat. And I go, I think you're right. But it was still happening.
Your dad said this?
My
Wow.
dad said
In
this.
Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin.
Let's just take a second, let that sink in. Okay.
Yep, exactly. So I was like, yeah, I think there really is something to this. So, and then after that, I slowly started reducing the dairy from my diet. And again, in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So, and that, I don't want to say it's unheard of, but reducing dairy, that's if, we're just in this conference and everyone's saying like, how do you get rid of dairy? Well, come to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and people are definitely going to say that to you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I can't live without my cheese is what they said. And to be honest, I never thought that I would live without dairy, but I started reducing it. Let's just say from having 2 glasses of milk, I would tell myself per day, I might be having 2 glasses of milk. I said, okay, I'm going to limit it to 1. And then I slowly was very competitive with myself, like I am in many areas of my life.
The hockey player comes back out.
Yeah. And so I started reducing the dairy then, and I started noticing improvements. So I definitely wasn't fully plant-based, but so what had happened is I had taken Provera, which stimulates a period, and then you take Femara to help induce ovulation. Well, we had 1 failed cycle of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a kind of a complicated cycle because I started bleeding earlier than normal. So what we had said was we were going to try 3 cycles of that before we would go to the next intervention. Well, because I had started bleeding earlier than normal, the doctor said, well, we're going to have to skip the medication this cycle, and we're going to have to do a wait. Okay. So during that time, after that first failed cycle, again, kind of like you alluded to already, very frustrated,
Yeah.
hard to look at yourself, kind of just very disappointed. I thought there has to be more that I can do. So I turned to my husband after I had done even more of my research, especially in plant-based nutrition and pregnancy, to make sure that it was safe. And I said, I've done all of my research. I don't need you to do it with me, but I do need your support in it. I'd like to try a plant-based diet to help achieve pregnancy. And he, of course, hands down said, absolutely, anything that you think is going to help, let's do it.
Good man.
And 3 weeks later, I had my first ovulation in a year and a half and got pregnant that cycle.
I mean, I'm looking at you telling me the story now, and you look like you're just like walking on air,
Yeah.
floating on clouds. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it was like for you that day. Like, did you just feel like this huge burden had been lifted off of your shoulders?
Absolutely. I mean, an incredible burden had been lifted, and I wanted to tell everybody, but I waited.
I know, right?
Because I think also what comes with that is that you have fear of what could happen if, you go through infertility. What is the fear of possible miscarriage because I've had these trouble going forward.
Let's wrap up by talking about the emotions that come 7.5 months after those 6 weeks, right? So who comes out?
So my daughter, Eleni Virginia, was born, and we had an incredibly safe delivery. She was 5 days before her due date, and everything went so good. I can't even, talk about any mishaps. I guess I didn't really know what to expect entirely either, but it went pretty well against plan that I thought. And we, moving forward, raise our daughter plant-based as well. The conversation that I've had with my husband about raising our daughter plant-based has really been, if I can help prevent my daughter in any way from having to go through some of the things that I've had to go through, I'm going to do everything and I can to help do that for her. And so we follow a 100% plant-based diet with her, and she doesn't know any different at this point. She's almost 3, and she loves it. I just love watching her pick up her garbanzo beans and just eat them just as they are, and the sprouted grain breads, and it's really fun to watch.
That is Alison Tierney. Just what an incredibly remarkable and inspiring story. A woman who overcame PCOS by changing her diet. And if you want to hear that full interview, you can go into the archives of the Exam Room podcast. Just look for the Exam Room podcast by the Physicians Committee on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Just look for the episode that has Allison, came out last January. It's a phenomenal half-hour interview that at points will move you to tears. It's just such a remarkable turnaround for her. And I was so proud that she was able to share that with us on the show. And again, she's also featured in Dr. Barnard's book, Your Body in Balance. So we're going to be telling you a little bit more about that cyber book signing tonight with Dr. Barnard, Lindsay Nixon, and myself. That's going to start at 5 o'clock Eastern. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get a check on health headlines. Here's what's happening for Monday, November 30th, 2020. And the U.S. now is bracing for what may be another surge of coronavirus cases following the Thanksgiving holiday, where millions of Americans ignored CDC recommendations to stay home. The worry also comes just days after the country topped 200,000 cases in a single day for the first time. The daily average now around 160,000 cases. To date, there have been more than 13.4 million infections that have been reported, with 267,000 people now having died. Meanwhile, a meatpacking plant in Colorado that was already hit hard by a COVID-19 outbreak is facing another wave of cases. At least 32 workers now at the JBS plant in Greeley, Colorado, have tested positive over the last 2 weeks. 6 workers died and nearly 300 others became ill during the initial outbreak in the spring. The company's nearby headquarters also working to contain an outbreak there. 38 employees have tested positive at that location. And finally, if you need another reason to eat a healthy diet, check this out. High blood pressure. It is most commonly associated with heart-related conditions, but now we are learning that it may also impact the health of your brain. A study of more than 37,000 adults in Europe finds those who had high blood pressure in their 40s and 50s were more likely to have brain damage later in life. And doctors say that damage increases the risk of dementia, stroke, and physical disability. Plant-based diet, meanwhile, has been shown to effectively lower blood pressure. Something to keep on your mind as you move forward into a healthier new year. And we're going to move forward into a new show tomorrow when Dr. Hana Kaliova will be joining us. So if you like to nerd out about nutrition, I highly recommend setting an appointment for noon Eastern right back here on Facebook and YouTube. She always brings the latest and greatest nutrition science. Tomorrow will be no exception. So she will be here with us. And then don't forget, coming up tonight at 5 o'clock Eastern, join Dr. Barnard, the Happy Herbivore, Lindsay Nixon, and myself, 5 o'clock Eastern for a virtual book signing. Dr. Barnard's going to be talking about Your Body in Balance, his latest book, including PCOS, which is covered in there. And he's also going to be talking about his best-selling book, The Cheese Trap. Going to be talking about all of those. Lindsay, who wrote the recipes for Your Body in Balance, she's going to be joining us, and she also will be sharing her remarkable journey back to health. She too saw marked improvements by adopting a plant-based diet. And you can get your copies of these books autographed right now. All you need to do is head over to pcrm.org/buy now, register for the event, say which copies you want. Dr. Barnard will personally sign them to you. So go ahead, pcrm.org/buy now. All proceeds go to benefit the Physicians Committee, and we hope to see you at 5 o'clock tonight. For now, though, that is all the time that we have. I want to say thank you again to Dr. Barnard for joining us and Alison for sharing her story as well on this Motivation Monday. Also want to thank the crew behind the scenes that makes today's show possible. Thank you, guys. And to you who's watching at home and raising your nutrition IQ with us, thank you, my exam roomies. Appreciate you being here. For everyone at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. But until then, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.